morning, everyone. Welcome to XM Live, to the Traders Talk. And my name is Gil Paz. I'm a full-time trader and an expert at XM Live, which is streaming on 3 different channels, 8 hours every single day. And today we have a special guest, and this is Curtin from Hawaii. And she is the Wall Street coach. And I'm extremely thrilled to have you here, Kiman. It's really a pleasure. And I'm very excited about the next 2 hours. I must say also a little bit anxious because we will go a little bit deep also into my trading things. And so there is a certain anxiousness, but also a huge excitement. Thank you so much for coming here, Kiman. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's 8 p.m. my time, so I'm a little tired, but I'm very excited to be here too. So thank you for having me, Gil. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's really an honor for us. So, XM is a global broker with traders from all around the world. We have Africa, Asia, Americas. There are a lot of retail traders that are here. Some are successful, some are not successful. And I think, and we always, at XM Live, we always tell them that the most important part of trading is actually psychological, because people in the end, they ask, is gold going up? Is gold going down? And it's nice to answer that. Like we can give our opinion as traders, but in the end, we always say the most important part is the psychological part of trading. And we actually never have an expert, who can really, like I say, okay, I have my 15 years experience of trading, and so I can talk about my experience, but I'm not a professional to answer those psychological questions. So I'm so thrilled to have you here, because that's actually what traders need. They need help in their psychological path of becoming successful.
Yeah, I think traders need to see themselves as entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs, yes, they have to listen to mentors, but an entrepreneur has to do the work themselves. And, you want to have a franchise, then you're going to follow a play-by-play book. But trading is not like a franchise. So you can't just ask people when to trade. You have to learn how to trade yourself. What's going to match your strategy, your temperament, your stomach, your intellect. Like, these are very unique to each trader.
Absolutely. I so much agree. Now, before we go into these themes, your name says you are the Wall Street coach. So
Sure.
I would like to go to the 2 terms that you have in your title, Wall Street and coach, and ask you first about Wall Street. So I would like to ask you a little bit. You grew up in New York, or in the New York neighborhood.
Yeah, I was born in Brooklyn and then lived in Brooklyn till probably 6 years old. And then we moved to Long Island, and I started to go to school in New York City on weekends when I was 16. So Wall Street was just a few more subway stops from where I went to college. Yeah.
So what was Wall Street for you as a child? Was it interesting to you? Was it part of your life?
It was, I knew friends, parents who worked on Wall Street, but I think I was a little initially intimidated by it. It really didn't become something I gravitated towards until my mid-20s, because I have Jim Rogers' book, Investment Biker. When I read that book, I was like, wow, this is fascinating. Plus, he's riding a motorcycle across the world. How cool is that? And it was his book that had me decide to go into finance. So now, I've been working with and on Wall Street for almost 30 years. So the first 10 years was in finance. And then I started to coach 18, 19 years ago. Uh, yeah, so it's been, it's funny. Things sometimes you think are you're not going to be your cup of tea. And then you discover, actually, this is the perfect fit. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit sometimes.
How was it? So, can we talk a little bit about the years? In which years did you start to go to work at Wall Street? And how was Wall Street then? And how would you describe Wall Street today?
I think today it's a little bit more tame. Because when I started there, that was like 19 years ago. So when was I left in 2006? So right, so 19 years ago is 2006, and I was there probably from 96 to 2000. I mean, one of the places I worked had a keg in the kitchen. So it was a little bit of a wild west when I was there, but it was probably just beginning to kind of calm down a little bit. So yeah, but it was, especially as a woman, you had to have a little bit of thick skin. You had to have moxie. Um, the one of the first places I remember working at, they kind of hazed me to see if I was tough enough. And the length, you're sitting next to a trading desk. There's a lot of, cursing. I still curse a lot, and I have to, nobody curses in Hawaii. So I always have to apologize for being like a sailor because, you have to show them that you're not intimidated to get respect, right? You have to look like you can handle it. And yeah, so, I was able to handle it.
So this is really fascinating. So you were at trading. So I think there is probably, and correct me if I'm right, there is before financial crisis and then there is after financial crisis, and probably a lot of things changed in the financial crisis.
I'd left 2 years before the financial. I mean, there's been more than one. So, I was in there when the savings and loan issue occurred, but I left in 2006 and started my coaching practice specifically for Wall Street. And that was when I started to coach about a year and a half before the 2008 crisis. And then I was actually I was getting clients initially, but after the '08 crisis, all the business stopped. And I started to go back to Wall Street to take some temp work because, I had walked away from a very significant salary to start a coaching practice. But that '08 crisis made me think, oh my God, have I made a mistake walking away from a steady salary that was very abundant? But it was really kind of what catapulted me to coach specifically Wall Streeters. And that's how the name came about. I didn't name myself the Wall Street coach. One of the reporters that saw me coaching down on Wall Street during the crisis for free did an article about me and called me the Wall Street coach. And so I went then and trademarked it, about a year later. So, yeah.
That's amazing. So you said you were sitting next to trading desks,
Yeah.
and most of the traders, the viewers here, are retail traders. They sit often alone in front of the computer and they try to trade. How would you describe the retail trading world, the difference between a retail trading world and institutional trading? What makes the difference? Maybe also also practically what is different, but also in the mindset of the people. Can you a little bit describe those two worlds?
I would say the biggest differentiator is a professional trader at an institutional level has been able to transcend taking losses personally. they don't take it personally. They know it's a numbers game. So their ability to let go is like, they don't even think about it. It's like water off a duck's back, because I'm not saying they don't ever have regrets or resistance, but not at the level retail traders, partly because they are isolated, have a tendency to take losses so personally and they hold on so long because their identity and ego is so tied up in their P&L. They're usually looking at their P&L all the time, which is also not healthy. So I think the distinguishing is the traders in a firm are looking at the big picture. It isn't about this moment right now. It's about this moment, this moment, this moment. And they have the long tail, the long game in mind, as opposed to retail traders need to, especially for those who are perhaps 5 years or under. I think a lot of traders often come from other uh, professions where being right was rewarded.
Mm.
And so there can be a bit of a disconnect where they're like, wait a minute, everything that gave me success in my life thus far now doesn't work in this particular arena. So I think it's a little discouraging at first, and kind of demoralizing, because they don't have their sea legs. They were rewarded by school and academia by getting things right. And then they come into a landscape work, they're just right 40-50% of the time, they're going to be fine. And they don't have that kind of acclimated to that new landscape or culture. They're in a new culture. So they have to get that. There is a different game they're playing than the one they used to play in corporate America or in academia.
So in academia, it's often that your hard work and your brain brings success.
Right.
But in trading, what brings success? Is it also hard work and brain, or is it also something else?
Grit. You have to have grit, and you have to be willing to look at the mistakes you have made impersonally, like a scientist, like a surgeon. You can't get caught up with your ego in whether you're right or wrong. The more a trader can depersonalize and learn from their mistakes and say, how fascinating. Look at that mistake. I wonder what I could have done better or could have done differently. So then you can learn and take that with you for the next trade. How, if there's a famous hedge fund manager who's out on social media right now. He said when he hired his team, including his traders and his investors that came part of his firm, he said, I only hired people who had already gotten over themselves. What does that mean? It means guys who have already let go of their ego and don't have their whole identity caught up. And he said, I only wanted to work with people who had gotten over themselves. And I think that is probably what every trader, hopefully listening to us, thinks. If you haven't gotten over yourself yet, I would say pause your trading until you do, because you're going to pay with your capital every time you take things to heart.
That's amazing. Yeah. So would you say on an institutional level, I mean, how does a day of an institutional trader looks like? Does he start, he goes to a job, like for him it's a job. It's not because he also said a retail trader takes it much more personally, which I can understand because it's his own money, whereas an institutional trader trades the money of the company.
Yeah, but an institutional trader's bonus structure is going to be completely tied to their success. So it's not that they are, completely disconnected to what they want to trade well. First of all, they're not going to have a job if they're not trading well. But also their success is going to be dependent on what they do, how they operate. most often that will be the case. So it's not that they don't take it seriously. You can take something seriously without taking it personally. But I think because of the volume and because their firm too is looking for consistency and profitability over the long haul, they will give themselves space to have errors and space to make some mistakes. Of course, they have to manage their risk just like a retail trader does, but there
Mhm.
is a level of professionalism that I sort of wish retail traders would take themselves. Like, there's times, especially when traders are new, like, is your desk clean? Do you work in an office where there's clutter? Do you have a differentiation between your home and your workstation? Do you get interrupted? Like, if you aren't taking yourself seriously in your environment and how you are committed to, let's say, journaling after the end of a day, even though you're tired, if you don't treat yourself like a professional and operate like one, you can't expect yourself then to have the results of one.
I understand. Um, an institutional trader, when he comes to work in the morning, does he get a game plan? Like, is there a boss who tells him today you do this, this, and this?
I think
And
every
and also
unique.
maybe a follow-up,
No,
sorry, maybe
yeah,
also a follow-up question. And what you say that he has to work on himself and get over himself, is there on an institutional level, on a corporate level, is there a program that helps the trader to do that? Or does an institutional trader have to do this on his own? Like he is just totally on his own and he has to be successful and that's it.
it's going to be unique to each fund, each hedge fund.
Mm-hmm.
Each firm is going to have their own set of how they do it. That, has been a lot of the work I've done is being hired for those traders. Sometimes the fund will pay for their coaching. Sometimes they'll pay for some of it. Sometimes they just tell them you got to get a coach. Sometimes there are coaches in-house that are part of the firm who are there to help uplift their team. I think coaching's been around for 50 years now, but for some reason, at least in the US, it has been a little slower to catch on. Europe has been a little bit ahead of the curve on having coaches as part and parcel of a trader's experience. Now it's seen as a reward, as a bonus, because most trading coaches are not inexpensive. So it's a big investment. And most firms now see the return on investment. I mean, the stats are through the roof, like 700%, if not more. There are studies that say it's even higher of what someone will pay a coach and what that trader will get out of it. So I would say there are firms perhaps that are ahead of the curve who are conscious of how, wow, we have to have a team of traders that are not really kind of all caught up in their ego. But there's plenty of firms where I'm sure many are, but it's going to hurt the bottom line of the firm. But I think each firm is going to have their own way of operating. But again, it's just seeing yourself as a professional. Like, if you're a retail trader, how would you come into your desk each day if people were seeing you? Would you be coming in hungover? Would you be, asking silly questions? Like, you would be doing due diligence and have that sense of self-respect if you were in front of a room of people every day. So operate as if, I say.
We have here we have, by the way, we have a lot of comments. Many people from all around the world say hello and great to be here and
Sure.
all kind of nice stuff. Here is a question: what is most matters in trading for retail traders? So if I understand the question right, what is the most important thing for retail traders? What would you say? Probably how to become successful, right? That's what I understand here.
I would say it's probably like a three-legged stool, right? A three-legged stool means you have to know what you're doing, like the basics. You have to know the basics. You have to manage risk, and you have to be sure that you are being motivated and driven by your strategy and not your sense of, external validation. So psychology is part of that three-legged stool. You do have to be self-aware. You have to notice where your triggers are, so to speak, right? Because everybody has them. We all have triggers. But if you're not aware of those triggers, then you are going to even stumble when it comes to you learning how to be a strategic trader. And you're not going to manage your risk properly, too, if you're being triggered. You might be not taking enough risk. You might be taking too much. Like you have to be self-aware so that your ability to become fluent in trading, or at least the area you're going to be an expert in, for you to be able to become the best you can be. So I think some people say, oh, well, they shouldn't start coaching until after they learn how to trade. Maybe, but I'm like, this is a game where if you don't have a sense of how you operate under pressure, it's an expensive place to find out.
What is so? Until now, we talked a bit about trading and Wall Street, but let's come to the second world, to the coaching part. Even though you already started also with that, why do traders need a coach? What makes, like, okay, I'm struggling and I have to overcome my ego. And do you help only with overcome my ego, or how do you start with somebody who comes to you and say, I'm in a drawdown, I need help?
Yeah. So often traders are self-aware enough to come to the conversation, at least an inquiring conversation with me, speaking about specific things. So they will say, I can't cut my losses, or I get scared and don't hold on to my winners long enough, or I had a loss 2 years ago and I'm still afraid and not able to be free of it. They usually have a collection of specifics that they are aware of and they suspect keep influencing how they trade now. And so that becomes an inquiry where we begin to find out, wow, whatever is going on underneath that is where we have to go. It isn't usually just an intellectual process. In my experience, it is something that is much deeper. And so getting to the depth of what is informing that costly behavior is the key to why a coach is so powerful. Not because the coach is necessarily an expert on that person, but because the coach, if they're good and qualified, are going to ask questions that allow that person to start to reflect upon themselves. Oh, yeah, I do have a tendency to have this show up in usually other areas of their life. This is not, what I like to say is how you do one thing is how you do everything. So it's about becoming with someone who's a witness to you, who's going to hear how you talk. Where are you stopping yourself? How are you limiting yourself? What are the beliefs that perhaps are invisible to you, but are driving all of the choices you make? To me, that is life-changing. It was life-changing for me. I became a coach because I hired a coach in this kind of form that I practice. That's what I hired. I'm still working in a hedge fund in Wall Street at the time. And when I started to do the work with my coach, I became incredibly much more self-aware. It was so life-changing that I felt called to become a coach. So the inquiry of self, I think, is one of the most fascinating inquiries any of us can go on. I was very lucky to have Matthew McConaughey on my podcast a while back, and he said the same thing, that self-inquiry is where it's at because it is what's running us. So probably good idea. It's like a car. If you never open up the hood of the car and look at, like, where does the oil go? Where did the windshield wiper fluid go? At some point it's going to run out. It's going to need to fill it up. So you might want to know a little bit about how the front of your car is wired. Why wouldn't you want to know how you're wired?
I remember we had a preparation talk before we started this call, and you were talking about the meaning of money in the childhood of people, that this often has a very strong connection, how the trader deals with money today. Can you maybe... I found this very, very interesting because, again, I personally, I grew up in a, middle-class family, working class family, and money, there wasn't probably too much there, but it was also kind of a little bit like rich people. This is not something very good. Like we looked at them, that they are not the best people. They probably got rich by cheating and by and so I understand as well that I have certain, connections to richness, to a lot of money, to little money. Can you maybe a little bit elaborate on that? Because I think this is fascinating.
It's very important, and I really wish more traders paid attention to it because it is going to be an invisible glass ceiling above any trader's head, and possibly even yours, Gil, if you came with those beliefs. Those are beliefs that get set so early in us. Money is the root of all evil, or rich people cheat. If we have those kind of beliefs invisibly driving us in the background, then we're going to experience in our own financial life one step forward, two steps back. Because if our unconscious believes that only rich people get rich by cheating, well, I don't want to ever be seen as a cheater. And this is happening underneath, not consciously.
Mm-hmm.
One will sabotage oneself. I think this has a lot to do with why some traders start to have a lot of success, on a consistent basis, and then all of a sudden there's a big blow up. Often I think it's because there's an unconscious discomfort with that success, and that, is costly. So I would say to those who are listening, if you come from a blue-collar, working-class labor kind of background, and when I say labor, I mean like a laborer, like a coal miner or a construction worker or, a builder. Also, there's sometimes can be these beliefs where your families or your grandparents or great-grandparents had to physically kind of harm their bodies to put food on the table. And now, click, 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 that's you. There can sometimes feel like a disconnect, like, this isn't really hard work. And sometimes that's why traders overtrade or stay on the desk all day, because they have grown up with their perhaps circle of friends, whomever, physically paid a price with work that now with a click, 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 they can make more than that. And again, there can be sometimes this feeling of guilt or like, wow, is this fair? Especially if you have a tribe around you. We're tribal beings. If we have a tribe around us who perhaps isn't succeeding at the level we are, that can also get us a little bit uncomfortable and feel like, well, I'm going to lose my people. They might think, who do I think I am? So there's all these kind of secret under the hood things moving about. I would say you guys are best served to at least take a look at that so that you cannot get invisibly driven by that.
Is it though possible, because this is very deep roots. This is how we grew up. This is like who we are. Is it possible to change it? Or or do we build tricks around it? Like again, what you said, I'm coming from a blue collar family, and in order to get your salary home, you have to work hard. And so I do overtrade. And
Mhm.
is it possible to get this way out? Can we really change our foundations of belief, or do we have to build tricks around that to trick ourselves to a normal and a more normal behavior?
I think tricking ourselves is not the long-term solution. It might work once, twice, but it's not going to really give us the change we want. And I want to point back to something you said. You said, "This is who I am." And what I want to say to you is that is a story, that it is who you are. It is a very well traversed story, but none of us have stories that are who we are. They are stories we have just simply told ourselves for so long that we think it's who we are. All of us have been brainwashed. All of us have been programmed. So if the question is, can we change the programming? The answer is yes. But it starts with an awareness that there is programming in the first place. That the stories that we have been told, that we've told ourselves, how people talk about themselves, it's a story. So I'll give you an example. It's a story of how a young woman sees her mom making a recipe and cutting the ends off of the meat that goes in the oven. And she's like, "Why do you cut those ends off with that recipe every time?" And the mother says, "I have no idea." Well, luckily in this story, everybody's alive. So they call the grandmother. And she's like, "My mother always did that." By the time they get to the great grandmother, they say, "Why did you always make the food this way?" She said, "Because my pot was too small." So here we have 3 generations cutting off perfectly good meat, not because they need to, but because they watched another generation do it and they never questioned it. That's the inquiry each of us wants to do. Am I operating from default beliefs that maybe aren't applicable to my life? Maybe that's what my mother had to do or my father had to do, but do I have to do that? Maybe not. Maybe your pot is bigger.
And so yes, I'm aware now. I realize it that I don't have to do it, but am I still able, even when I realize that it's the right thing to do, not to cut the meat, am I
Yep.
able really to not
That
do it?
that's an intellectual awareness. That isn't all that one has to do to change the programming, but it's the first step, because you've got to realize your nervous system, your internal, like, lizard part of your brain is been so accustomed to that. It all comes down to this concept of safety. Until we feel safe with another programming, it's going to be really hard for us to go in a direction that feels counterintuitive to us. But first comes awareness, then there are practices, there are steps, there are coaching tools and techniques that one can adapt and start to practice like a muscle. You don't go into the gym and deadlift 150 pounds, you have to build your muscle. The same is true with beliefs about ourselves, stories that we have about ourselves. That takes inquiry and it takes some patience and compassion to begin to see, oh, this is a pattern. Isn't that fascinating? How do I begin to notice this? And it becomes that awareness opens things up. The light brings some, awareness, just like the roaches, run out of a kitchen when you flick on the lights. You gotta flick the lights on and take some looks at oneself. That is part of, I think, what the journey is all about.
I understand. There is one thing, I think, because everybody grows up with different beliefs and different traditions from their family, but there is one thing that I think every trader has a problem with, because we go all through the same education, and that's school. In school, we make tests. This is how in every country the school system is built up. We make tests, and we pass the test if we are 60% right, and we get a good grade if we are 80% right, and we get a perfect grade if we get 100% right. And so I think every trader wants to have a high hit rate, because this is how our whole childhood is educated in this education system. And it's extremely frustrating for every trader to realize that sometimes you can be 90% right and you still lose money.
Correct. Correct.
How,
I mean,
how do we deal with that?
We all watched that unfold. If anybody watched The Big Short, right? What happened with what happened to him? I mean, he was right, but he still almost lost his company because timing, right? But I would love to see. I wish we had a way to track those traders who ever went to a Montessori school or to a Waldorf school, where those schools were not layering this grade percentage point average. They were looking at leadership skills. They were looking at creativity solutions. Like, I bet the traders who went to Montessori or Waldorf or similar kind of schools probably don't have as much of an issue with having to get the percentages, because they got a different set of values instilled in them early. But the point is, you can do this for yourself right now. You can see, oh, I have this measuring stick that I got given in grade school, and it doesn't work for this journey I'm taking as a trader. How do did you stay true to your strategy? That is something you want to get an A+ in. Did you manage your risk? Did you look at the mistakes you made and learn something from them? Create your own metrics as opposed to using metrics that they're not applicable here. It's like going to, a foreign country as a person who might speak English and talking to them in your language. They're not going to understand you, and you're not going to understand them. So you have to realize, oh, I'm in a different landscape as a trader. All of the things I learned from other landscapes aren't going to necessarily benefit me here.
That is true. Wow. You mentioned The Big Short and Michael Burry, and actually that his timing was off. So what you are do I understand you right? You are saying that he was actually a bad trader because his timing was off, or?
Well, I mean, he made it by the skin of his teeth. I mean, we watched that movie, it's minus 110. He had his investors wanting to leave him in droves. And I don't know how he held on to their money, but in the end, at the 11th hour, he got it. But all his investors, you see the wrestling. He knows what should happen, but that's what the hardest part about trading is. You can be right and yet still not make the money. And so that is something that one has to reconcile with. That's going to be a level of discomfort that if you don't have the stomach for, get out now.
It's true. Wow. This is so true. What would you say? Maybe I'm switching here a little bit, but you are coached many traders. What is often where you can see a real turning point in the process of coaching? So when do you start to realize, oh wow, there something big is, maybe you can tell a story without maybe saying names, but
Sure. I think one story that's very powerful and that also speaks a lot to needs, which is something I also work with traders on. I help them identify what are the needs that are potentially driving how they're trading. So, what does that look like? The need for respect, the need to be uh, effective, the need to feel seen. These often are driving a trader, not their strategy. So during COVID, actually, there was a trader who came to me. She had been trading for over a decade. She was not a novice, and she came to the coaching saying, I am taking unusual risk in my account. I've never done this before. I don't know why I'm doing this. What is going on with me? And we began to explore what that could be about. And what we discovered was that she was a weekend warrior. She took these crazy adventure weekends where she would climb the side of a mountain without, a security belt. She would do these jump from a plane. She was doing these very high adrenaline kind of risky adventures. And guess what she hadn't done for months because of the COVID shutdown? She didn't get her adventure need met. So she started to unconsciously try to get her need for adventure met in her trading. As soon as she saw that, she couldn't unsee it. She was like, oh my God, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. And she was able to, she might still feel that need for that adventure, but now she's like, no, I've lost enough capital. I'm not going to do this anymore. But we had to make sure she got her need for adventure met outside of her trading. So she didn't come into trading looking to get that met. And that's what a lot of times I'll do with traders to start. I'll give them a list, a universal needs list, which if, your viewers want that list, they can, sign up for it. I can give you guys a link for them to go to. That list, I will say to traders, every morning before you sit down, look at it. If you just come off of an argument with your teenager who disrespected you, or somebody cut you off when you were dropping the kids off at school, like you're coming to your trading maybe angry, frustrated, maybe apathetic. What needs didn't get met? If you could identify those just for yourself, then you at least have a little better time of not trying to force a trade to show the market I'm right. That stuff is going to invisibly come out in your trading if you're not aware of the fact that you are off kilter a little bit before the day begins.
Oh, wow. This is, yes. Wow. What you're saying is really amazing. Now my question is, I ask myself, okay, if I'm an engineer, I go to work and I build bridges. Why do I don't have to do, personal work with myself? And why do I have to do it as a trader? Like,
I would argue that even an engineer has to be someone who self-reflects, because we're all every day interacting with other beings, driving to the job, dealing with promotions, dealing with having somebody get the engineers, paperwork to him on time. And each of us are in situations called life that are going to challenge us. And so these are just basic tools to handle difficulty, to handle challenge. These are tools that most of us didn't get in our family of origin because our parents didn't get them. So everybody's doing the best they can, but the quality of the best we can't but improve if our tools are best. You don't want to use a tool you'd use on a Tacoma truck on a Ferrari. It's not going to work. And it's nothing wrong with the car or the tool. It's just the wrong tool for that car. Each of us are like our own individual car. just get the tools, find out, oh, these are the places I have my triggers. How do I not get triggered? We're going to get triggered, but how do I respond, not react? Because the reaction is going to cost me my capital.
Mm-hmm. But that's so crucial in trading, because again, as an engineer, I still probably am able to build a bridge without that it breaks, even though I have my personal problems. In trading, making the fall mistakes normally just brings losses. Right? That's it.
I agree. And it becomes a sort of a kind of like a vicious cycle, because that a lot of, what happens with traders is they will just I'm just going to grind it out. And then, just watch their capital go even lower. That grinds it out. I don't want to make it wrong, but it has often a backfire effect on traders. They don't need to grind more. They actually need to be more self-aware more.
I understand. Why? Maybe as a final question for this session, for this hour, in the second hour, we do it a little bit in a different. How important for a success? Two questions, actually. The first question you mentioned before, the trader that you coached, that was already a woman that was already 10 years in the profession. What would you say is the average years that a trader, because you're a top performer as a trader, you're like, I often compare it to an athlete. How long can you be, an athlete on the highest level? How long can you be trader? Is it possible to make your whole life a career as a trader, or eventually the stress is too big? That's the first question. And the second question, maybe I just follow up, is intuition an important part of successful trading, or should you keep intuition out of trading?
Well, the first part is, I think it's very unique to each individual trader how long that length of career is going to look. I do think that there is a certain level for those at a very high level who, over time, will choose to trade because they love it. And then there are those who say, wow, I've put 10, 20, 30 years into this, and I want to have the ability to still trade when I want, but I also want to enjoy travel or my family or other hobbies or opportunities. I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. I think there's what's your way. There are those who they love it so much, they're never going to want to not trade. But we see that with Jack Schwager's book and all of his market wizard books and unknown market wizards like Jason Shapiro. I mean, he loves trading. I don't think that man's going to ever not be trading, and he's been at it 30 years, there are people who just love what they do, and this is their life, So I think it has to be unique to you. But yes, I think that level of competency can last for decades. But to go to your second question, I believe intuition is a critical part of a trader's success, whether they are aware of it or not. I think there are a lot of traders who probably don't even think their intuition is operating when it is. One book that I really love that advocates this is a book called it's The Intuitive Investor. And even though that is the title, I can promise you it's very applicable to traders. Jason Apollo-Voss, he's a good friend of mine. He's actually one of the 50 that are in my book, Transforming Wall Street, but I also had him on my podcast. So you could just look up the Wall Street Coach podcast with Jason Apollo-Voss, and he talks at length about the power of intuition for traders. It's an incredible conversation and speaks to how intuition is already happening within you. But are you conscious of it? Are you aware of the signals? Because so much of trading is recognition, but a lot of traders have just not identified the bodily signals. You're getting them, but if you're not connected to Soros is like the most famous trader who said his back would start to hurt at particular times with the market. So he was having his intuition, but he identified what the body signals were for him.
But I think probably so the intuition comes with experience, right? It's kind of an unconscious knowledge that you have that you don't really realize that you have, because intuition without any experience is probably just fear or greed or something, you know.
I think intuition is something that you can train. And I agree with you, intuition is going to come from experience. But I do suspect that there is a lot of intuition that gets mixed up with feelings. And being able to distinguish between the two is a critical part of a journey, especially for novice traders under 5 years. You're going to need to understand the difference between a feeling and even a desire of what you want versus what a true sense of intuition is telling you. That, again, is about becoming somebody who is self-aware to see, oh, my ego wants this, versus this is some pattern recognition happening for me right now.
Wow, we just
Or
started.
fear,
Yeah.
or fear, or even a fear operating. Like a lot of times, traders, their fear will take over. And that feeling of fear, I'm not safe, I have to get out of this, is not necessarily something that is guiding them properly either. So feelings on both sides. I'm really happy about this. I'm excited and I'm scared to death. Those both could be coming again from other places, not necessarily what's in front of you.